Hello, BookTube. We are continuing with our 12.8K Q&A with Actively Read. Hey, Steve, keep powering through the construction annoyance. I am trying to. Stay strong. I'm trying to. You are helping a lot. All of you are helping a lot. And so is the Bean, and so is this little book room with these books that are getting all the love in the world these days. Number one, who do you believe are the better writers of this group of thriller authors? Brad Thor, Brad Taylor, Mark Greene, Lee Child, Jack Carr, Vince Flynn, David Baldacci, or Greg Hurwitz. Of that list, it would be Mark Greene and Greg Hurwitz. By a fairly wide margin. The others are largely junk. Maybe enjoyable junk. You might enjoy them. Your dad might enjoy them, but they're really, really bad. Whereas that particular snap of an author who is present on the page, who's paying attention and trying to do an entertaining job, it's absent from most of those names. Number two, why did the book publishing industry basically stop making the short but lovable mass market paperbacks in favor of these repulsive, tall mass market paperbacks? I don't know. I don't understand the change in shape of the standard mass market that had worked for decades. First, it went to those tall mass markets. Now it's gone to those square. Oh, here's a tall mass market. Here's Hunt for October. Taller than a normal mass market, as you can see. But now it's gone to those Kindle-shaped things, those square things that just pop right out of your hand. They're impossible to hold. You can't grip them in the back. A Kindle you can use with one hand. A paperback book you cannot use with one hand. And so imitating the form factor of something you can use with one hand is disastrous. But I have no idea why it happened. None whatsoever. Number three, are you finding yourself using your Kindle/Kobo/Nook more than your iPad for reading ebooks these days? Or are you still mostly using your iPad? I was using my Kindle Paperwhite pretty much exclusively. It's just so easy, and it's on all the time. It never runs out of power, unlike my Kindle Oasis. Even though it doesn't have page turn buttons, I just haven't minded. I've been using that, but then one of you sent me an iPad Mini 4. Fourth generation iPad Mini. A really good machine that has now thousands of books on it. And that calls to mind this particular device. This is the iPad second generation. Lil Henry. This is the iPad second generation. This is the iPad, the only iPad. This is the only piece of non-computer technology that I had forever. The person who got this for me got it for me when it was new. It was like $500 or $600, something like that. In an origin story that's very funny over wine and calzones, I will gladly tell you that origin story of how I got an iPad, my very first iPad. And forever and ever, that's all I did on this thing. I read on, this is how I learned to love to read ebooks, was on this thing and on the primitive iPhone that I had at the time. But the iPhone I never used when I was home. I did a huge amount of reading on this thing, and the iPad Mini summons up those old memories. So the iPad Mini has largely taken over for now. I don't know if that will stay true. Dr. Bacon has a barrage of questions. Number one, could you share what a typical day was like studying under the Jesuits? Just memorize everything. Memorize everything, ask questions about everything. Question number two, are you a fan of the work of Joe Abercrombie? I've been reading through his First Law trilogy, which has been recommended by many of my friends, but I wonder if I'm missing something. It seems pretty run-of-the-mill fantasy to me so far. It's recommended by a lot of your friends, also recommended by pretty much everybody on YouTube, on BookTube, and I agree. It's good, but it's not, I'm going to tattoo the first chapter on my buttocks, which is what it's estimated as when you hear its fans talk about it. I don't understand that at all. It's just good. Question number three, what do you think of the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch, and do you think we will ever see the fourth book? We might see the fourth book. The first book I loved. I don't think any of the others have captured that magic. But the first book was fantastic, and there are some incredible scenes in there, sequences of scenes in there that really took thought and work. Question number four, I recently heard someone say that St. Augustine's transition to Christianity was due to his deep struggle with lust. Something seemed off to be in the simplified way the statement was made. Could you possibly expand on if this is true or if there's more to the story? I'm sure that Augustine would have liked you to believe that story. I think there's more to the story than that. I'd be willing to bet a Boston cream pie that he never actually stopped shagging whores. I'd be willing to bet that. Christianity or no Christianity. It's usually Christians who put forward that narrative. Because what's implicit in that narrative? I turned to Christianity because of my struggle with lust, because Christianity will fix that. Because Christianity is a higher, more moral pathway to put my feet on. Ask yourself if that's true. Reflect for even a moment on some of the Christians that you've known, or some of the ones that have been in history or in the news. Let's see here. Seeking Destiny says, "Hey Steve, these Q&As are the best. A few questions. In regard to the teacher that sparked your love of reading, could you detail any specifics as to what actually sparked it?" I saw how much these things meant to him. These things that I had not thought of at all. When I thought about them, I'd only scorned them. But then I saw how much they meant to him. I saw how much he was willing to risk for them. In an unguarded moment, I saw what he was willing to risk for a whole world that I had never thought was there. I had seen men who knew about adjacent worlds to the visible world, whether it was duty or patriotism or even greed. And I'd seen how much they were willing to risk, and it wasn't as much. Suddenly I thought, in that moment, he didn't even know I was watching. He had no way. There was no dissimulation in that moment. That was real. And he was willing to sacrifice anything for that world. So that world ought to bear investigation. It has more of a compelling call than a call to arms, call to nation, call to money. And I found out that was true. Let's see here. What are your thoughts on Where the Crawdads Sing? Is it worth the hype? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And there are some fair moments in the adaptation. I got a screener of the adaptation and watched a bit of it with Harris Dickinson. Naturally, I'm sure there are other stars in there, but the only one I paid attention to was Harris Dickinson. I thought the adaptation had some fairly effective moments. And since you're the ultimate dude, bro, am I the ultimate dude, bro? Then where are my multiple billions of dollars? I can barely scrap together $12 on Patreon every month. Where are all my? Why isn't my Patreon bringing me in $30,000 a month? That'd be a lot of books at the prattle. Why are Robert Greene's books so popular in your dude bro cult? I wish it were my cult. I could use it for good. But it's easy to tell. I'm sure you can look at Greene's books and tell yourself why they're so popular. They are a life hack. They lie and pretend that if you read this book, you will get a secret that's out there that's like computer code. But all you have to do is know it in order to use it, like a lever or something like that. And finally, can you briefly explain why the far-right nutjobs are praising the recent destruction of the Georgia Guidestones? It's easy. The far-right nutjobs are also Christo-fascists. They don't care about politics. They care about what they always say is Christ the King on his throne. And what they mean by that is 8th century BC Judea. That's what they want. They don't want the 1950s. Don't believe them when they say that. They want 8th century BC Judea. So women are chattel. They are the property of either their husband or their brother or their rapist. Where black people and brown people are hewers of wood and drawers of water. They aren't even human. They're beasts of burden. That's what they want. That's what Ben Shapiro wants. He wants 8th century BC Judea. And that's why they rejoice at the destruction of these so-called Guidestones. They would, if they could, burn libraries the same way and cheer them on, and except for religious libraries. That's what's coming. Christo-fascism. Let's see here. Z. Kate says, congrats on 12.8. What was your favorite biography you read this year? Paula Byrne wrote a book called The Adventures of Miss Pym, about Barbara Pym, the novelist Barbara Pym, that I thought was really, really good. Recently, I read, and I will reread, Robert Crawford. Some of you may remember last year, Robert Crawford wrote a book called Young Eliot, about T.S. Eliot. Was it last year? Maybe the year before that? I loved it, thought it was absolutely fantastic. And he has now written a new book called Eliot After the Wasteland. That's old, bitter Eliot, and it is every bit as good. And on a much, much more traversed ground than young Eliot. So those two certainly rank up high, but I'm keeping a lot of spots open on my list. The fall is, as usual, going to bombard the list with biographies, including the great Stacy Schiff, writing about Samuel Adams, one of my 5 guys. Don't get much better than that. So I'm leaving a lot of room open. Did you like Strange New Worlds and Prodigy? Are you planning to make more, preferably very long, Star Trek videos? Well, the Star Trek season is coming up. Book Trek 2022 has been shortened from 50 months or whatever it was last time to 2, August and September. There's one thing that Book Trek and also the Belgaria Apocalypse has taught us. It's that 5-month reading events on BookTube don't work. 2 months maximum is good. And we're doing that again. Vin at Revenant Reads is hosting Book Trek 2022 for August and September. And it looks like I might have the full use of Hyde Cottage back by August. So I will be flooding the airwaves with Star Trek stuff, absolutely. But in answer to your question, I have watched both Prodigy and Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And Prodigy, I thought, was really, really good. Really, really high energy. The big question mark that I had was Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Since I had a feeling, I mean, it's Kurtzman's Trek, and a leopard doesn't change his blue check marks. So I had a feeling that I knew what I would get with Star Trek Strange New Worlds. But instead, it's been great. The first season just ended, and it was great. It was fantastic. There were little bits and pieces from Star Trek Discovery, bits of Star Trek Discovery, that were held over that I hated. But the larger thing that I hate about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, I just sort of let go. The larger thing that I hate about it is that it clearly has an ulterior motive. Everything that SJW creators do has an ulterior motive. They don't care about the product in front of them. They only care about the message, the game plan, the ulterior motive. And the ulterior motive here seems pretty obvious, and that is to erase the original Star Trek. Just to have it that it doesn't exist. Do it over again. And the final episode, the season finale of season 1 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, comes as close to that as they're ever going to do. It's an alternate timeline, an alternate universe, but nevertheless, it's clearly meant to be, this is how Balance of Terror, the classic episode, would really go. I'm hoping that that the show just keeps being good. I have a feeling that the fact that it's hitting all of these great marks, hitting all these great notes, great character interaction, no Jesus figures, teamwork, fallibility. It's a physically beautiful show. Oh my God, it's the most beautiful TV show I've ever seen. But I mean, the personality stuff has all been so wonderfully done. And I know those beats are working perfectly. Akiva Goldsman and Alex Kurtzman got trained professionals to do this show. And as a result, those beats work perfectly. And this is a star-making turn for Anson Mount. He has a career all mapped out, 7 seasons of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, a lifetime of honored appearances at Star Trek conventions. But this, if there was any justice in the world, this would launch him into leading man status on the big screen. A man among boys on the big screen, can you imagine? But all those beats work because these two SJW blue check marks got trained professionals to provide them. But I know they're only there because Goldman and Kurtzman hate the people they're serving up for. I know that's what they're thinking in their board meetings, in their creative meetings. I know they're thinking, yeah, we'll give these neck-bearded man-baby crypto-fascists what they want. And when they say neck-bearded man-baby crypto-fascists, they mean long-time traditional Star Trek fans. It's the one-on-one equation. If you don't have pronouns in your bio on Twitter, you're not a real Star Trek fan, as far as they're concerned. And they own Star Trek. But I found that I don't really care what their motives are. The beats are still there. These are great, great episodes. It's not, I don't know what I would call it. It can't be Star Trek if it erases my Star Trek. And that's clearly what it intends to do. But it's close enough. It's close enough. Let's see. I guess we will make long videos, won't we, on the subject? View from the bar. Oh, my God. You again. Well, the feeling's mutual, bub. Number 1, thanks for nudging me toward Interview with a Vampire. I loved it, and I'm excited to continue the series. Yes, well, the series goes up from... Interview with a Vampire is really good, but Vampire Lestat is amazing. And starts off right away by saying, you didn't believe all that stuff you read in Interview with a Vampire, did you? Just amazing. What do you make of Anne Rice's later Christian period? I was in high school, not paying much attention to anything. But I remember reading reviews that felt condescending or tolerant. Were they good? How do you make sense of her temporary renunciation of her earlier books? The reviews were tolerant because probably those reviewers were told by their editors, you can't bash Anne Rice in this paper or we'll lose all our readers. But the books are terrible. Absolutely terrible. Number 2, on that note, what do you make of celebrities getting caught up in weird religious things like Scientology? I've read that those institutions tend to prey on celebrities who have some kind of double life, usually something sexual. They lull them into a confession and then blackmail them. What's your take on how that happens? I don't think they need to go to that much bother. Celebrities don't need to have a complex double life. Most of them are absolute ninnies. I mean, if you were to do some sort of comparative cognitive test, they would rank far, far lower than a newborn sheep in the back 40. they're absolute ninnies and completely biddable. Someone comes along and tells them, "Hey, I want you to do this," they'll do it. There's no fad they don't adopt, whether it's cupping or the latest anaerobic fad or whatever. They all do it. They all do it at the same time. They all do it the same way. They all move on at the same time to the next one. It's not hard to co-opt a celebrity. They're really, 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 I mean, fawn chewing leaves in the backyard dumb. So I don't think it takes much in the way. The idea that they use a secret sexual life to maneuver people has been popular for decades because of Tom Cruise. Because of the standard story that Tom Cruise, all the stories that have floated around him for years about his predilection for wearing neoprene, for young men and wearing neoprene. Some of those stories strike me as too specific to be false, but what difference does it make? Watch the film footage of him at Scientology meetings. If you think that's being coerced out of him, it's not. He's not that good an actor, believe me. If there's anybody I know that about, it's him. Let's see here. Number 3, McSweeney's is finally digitizing Volman's unabridged Rising Up and Rising Down for a winter release. Would that prompt a reread? Let him go. You don't care about Volman and you don't care about Rising Up and Rising Down. You only care about its status as a drug. When you ask about that book, whether it's a digital release or anything else, you're not talking about the book. You're talking about the latest supply from Columbia. Let it go. When you feel tempted to read this or obsess about it or, yeah, man, good stuff, take Small House at Arlington by Anthony Trollope off the shelf and read it. Daniel Tome says, "Hey, Steve, congrats on 12.8. 3 questions. Number 1, what are your thoughts on YouTube's policy for hiding the dislike count? It's dumb. It's dumb. And it was done for dumb reasons. It was done because certain SJW creators on YouTube went to YouTube saying that these dislikes are review bombs. They're bots. They're not real. They had no proof. And we don't know that it's true. I'd suspect that every one of those was a genuine individual who went there and didn't like what they saw. If you're doing that sort of thing to protect your prima donnas, that's not a good idea. Number 2, now that dislikes are not shown, have you considered displaying the likes count on your videos again? Why would I do that? They're like Goodreads stars. Why would I do that? I want comments on my videos, or if you don't want to comment on my video, then send a comment in email to me. But a thumbs up on a complex discussion that I have, or even a non-complex rant, what does that do? That doesn't tell me anything. Standard YouTube creators, maybe not in our corner of BookTube, but standard YouTube creators would say definitely do it because it helps with the algorithm. But I don't want help with the algorithm. I want to be hidden from the algorithm. So no, I'm not going to bother with it. Number 3, what do you think happened to the body of Jesus? Your take on historical controversy. If Jesus existed. If an individual preacher named Jesus existed, and if that preacher was crucified by the Romans, then his body was pulled down off the cross and thrown in a ditch. The last 3 dozen people who were crucified in that area. Nothing else. All the rest is mythology. But keep in mind, even that is mythology. But if that happened, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, that historically happened, so what do we make of the empty tomb and Joseph of Arimathea and all that nonsense? It's all mythology. Until you can prove it to me. And you can't. You can certainly prove that the Romans crucified people. And you can certainly prove how they dealt with the dead bodies afterwards. Crucifixion it takes a long time to die when you're crucified, unless they kill you while you're hanging there, but they usually didn't. Almost always they didn't. In fact, there were sometimes rules. The slow, lingering nature of it was part of the point. So it could last a long, long time. You might think, no, but it could last a long time. And usually the reason that the person died was massive exsanguination when their bowels gave out. Usually wasn't that, they just picturesquely gave up the ghost as Jesus does in the famous stories. It's usually a long time later that you're upright like that. Usually it's just that you can't support your weight anymore and your bowels give out, and that massive exsanguination causes you to die, and even that takes hours. But anyway, Mr. Morningstar says, imagine the alien overlords play God and force you into a new profession as a novelist. How much force would that take? What would people call you based on your favorite influences? E.g., Steve is the next Osama Dazan or next James Hanley. Well, I'd write under a pseudonym. It's entirely possible that I'd be doing a huge amount of work every day to get a novel written for someone who can't do it themselves. Maybe that's happened a few times. Maybe I already have a kind of a career as a novelist, but you want my name on the title. I would use my own name. Thank you very much. Generations of Donohues and Leahys and Hickeys did not labor in the mud of Donegal in order for me to abandon the honored family sobriquet. Also, did you end up reviewing / liking the Deloriad? No, I didn't. I read it, but I didn't do anything with it. Babette Marjan says, hey Steve, I have questions about dogs, and I hope I can ask it correctly. Why would you be incorrectly? Nobody asks incorrect questions on my watch. I have lost my beautiful baby 2 months ago. She was a 13-year-old gentle golden retriever. I'm so sorry to hear that. Now I can't pet a dog without crying, but I really miss having a dog in my life. But how do you know when you're ready for that deep connection again? When are you ready to love a dog not as a replacement, but as their own self? What should I wait for or feel? Thank you so much. You're ready now. I know you don't feel it, but you're ready now. And I've never met you, but you know perfectly well, I know perfectly well, when you meet a new dog, when you go to your shelter and adopt the oldest dog there, and take that dog home, you know perfectly well you are not going to think of that dog as a replacement only. You know that's not going to happen. You're not able to be that dumb, that shallow. You're not giving yourself enough credit, and you're ready now. In fact, you'll never be more ready than by helping someone who desperately, desperately needs you. Don't wait. The waiting will codify, and you'll just stay that way. I know people where that's happened. They say, well, we're just not ready emotionally, so we're going to wait, and 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, they're still waiting. That gap where the dog was closes over. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. Go to your local shelter and adopt the oldest dog there. Maybe 2. If there's a pair that are bonded, that like each other, and that no one's adopting, adopt that dog. That dog's personality, that dog's needs will be different from your baby. They'll be every bit as real, but they'll be different. And you will adapt to those needs. You'll start seeing, oh, why are you doing that? Oh, that's odd. Oh, aren't you funny? Oh, you don't like it when I do that. Or here's what I'm going to do. You don't like it, but you need to get used to this. All that will be individual. It won't be a replacement. Take my word for it. Go and do it. There are people out there who desperately, desperately need you. The longer you wait, the more of them die. That's as simple as that. Go and find them. They will heal you. Take my word for it. If you might not believe it, you might think, oh no, it's way too soon. You're wrong. And I'm right. There's no subject in the world I know better than this one. I'm right about this. And in a month, you will email me and say, oh my God, thank you so much. Definitely do it. Definitely do it. And email me with any help that you need. Okay, let's move on here. We have time? We have time. Patrick O'Toole. Hey, Stephen Bean. I recently read Crossing. Yes, the Bean is... Oh, you can see her. She's right over there on the pin. She's here. She's within easy reach of me. She's just not in the video. I recently read Cross-Examined by John Campbell, right here, on your recommendation and loved it. I've been going down several YouTube rabbit holes since and came across Bart Ehrman. What do you think of his books? Also, do you like the books of st.donoghue? Hope your house gets back to normal soon. I do like Notaboom, and I don't particularly like Bart Ehrman. His books seem to me to be strained and rather simple. I think he wants to be a star, and I think that really hurts his scholarship. I wish that he would buckle down and write a book every 5 years that's serious, as opposed to these quickies the nature of hell or heaven and hell or things like that they don't seem to me to need much in the way of involvement by him. I often wonder if he is all that much involved in them, or if grad students do a lot of the grunt work. Harrison Recht says, number one, I enjoyed your review a few years ago of William Marvel's book on Edwin Stanton. Yes, my classic review of Marvel's book on Edwin Stanton, which I worried about at first because I'm just having a blast in that review. That's all it is. I'm just having a ball. And when I don't usually care about authors, they can fend for themselves. I'm in this for you, not for them, to both instruct you and entertain you, although my Edwin Stanton review was mainly meant to entertain you. But briefly, once it went live on the old Open Letters Monthly site, I worried that maybe if the author did encounter it, he would be incensed. Wrongly so, since it isn't an attack on his book or on him, but instead he loved it. He left a message that I think is gone. The old Open Letters Monthly site is largely scrubbed of extra content, like comments and whatnot, but he left a comment that I cherish. I took a screenshot of it saying that this is not only the best review he's ever read of one of his books, it's the best review of any book that he's ever read. He got it. He got what I was doing, so that was great. What are your thoughts on Marvel's 4 volumes on the Civil War? I like all of his books. I think he's a really talented writer. Number 2, do you recommend Charles Moore's 3-volume Margaret Thatcher biography? Oh boy, do I ever. Oh man, what a work of biography. So icy in its eloquence, so incredibly steeped in its research and judgment. You just don't get multi-volume biographies like this anymore. You just don't, regardless of the subject, regardless of what kind of a monster the subject might be. The books themselves are perfect examples of biography. The biographers are. I can't recommend them strongly enough. How are we doing for time? We've got time for one more. Anthony Suppa. After listening to your political rants for years now, I've come to the conclusion that you're a lot more politically moderate than meets the eye. Well, there are conclusions and there are conclusions. So my question is, if you were alive in Massachusetts in the 1770s, very nice of you not to assume that I was, and not taking into consideration 200 plus years of historical hindsight, do you think you would be a patriot or a loyalist? I'd like to think that I would opt for greater freedom. And maybe a remission of back taxes. That would be great. Madman Gone Mad, politically moderate. Oh my. Madman Gone Mad, 2012. Thoughts on C.S. Lewis's An Experiment in Criticism. It's fantastic. It's every word of it. It's just amazingly good. I have a copy where almost every line is underlined. I found it eye-opening aplenty and made me reassess my future TBRs. But as it is an old book, I'd like to hear about it from today's professional critics such as yourself. Any strong disagreements with the book? Any books that have succeeded at best? I don't have any. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Every reader should read An Experiment in Criticism by C.S. Lewis. Every reader should. It's amazingly good. In terms of, I don't know about succeeded it, but successors, things like it that set your short hairs up on end because it's so good, I would definitely recommend Randall Jarrell. Poetry in the Age is an amazing, amazing book. I'd certainly recommend that. But here, let's wrap this up and go on to part 3.